Oh, hi, how are you? Shall we have another part of our read along? Our read along of Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I'm using the Wordsworth edition. What are you using? For some reason, that my head keeps going all funny shapes tonight. My head isn't a funny shape, but it's just doing weird stuff on the camera. So if you look at this and you think, Mr. S's head is a funny shape, it isn't. Okay, you go and get your copy of the book, and I'll meet you back here to carry on with chapter 9. It's a long one tonight. The rat rose and descended riverwards once more, then changed his mind and sought the side of the dusty lane. There, lying half buried in the thick, cool underhedge tangle that bordered it, he could muse on the metalled road and all the wondrous world that it led to, on all the wayfarers too that might have trodden it, and the fortune and adventures that had gone to seek or found unseeking out there beyond. Footsteps fell on his ear, and the figure of one that walked somewhat wearily came into view, and he saw that it was a rat, and a very dusty one. The wayfarer, as he reached him, saluted with a gesture of courtesy that had something foreign about it, hesitated a moment, then with a pleasant smile turned back from the track and sat down by his side in the cool herbage. He seemed tired, and the rat let him rest unquestioned, understanding something of what was in his thoughts, knowing, too, the value all animals attach at times to mere silent companionship, when the weary muscles slacken and the mind marks time. The wayfarer was lean and keen-featured, and somewhat bowed at the shoulders. His paws were thin and long, his eyes much wrinkled at the corners, and he wore small gold earrings in his neatly set, well-shaped ears. His knitted jersey was of a faded blue, his breeches patched and stained, were based on a blue foundation, and his small belongings that he carried were tied up in a blue cotton handkerchief. When he had rested a while, the stranger sighed, snuffed the air, and looked about him.
Oh, that was clover. That warm whiff on the breeze, he remarked. And those are cows we hear cropping the grass behind us and blowing softly between mouthfuls. There is a distant sound of reapers, and yonder rises a blue line of cottage smoke against the woodland. The river runs somewhere close by, for I hear the call of a moorhen, and I see, by your build, that you're a fresh-water mariner. Everything seems asleep, and yet going on all the time. It's a goodly life that you lead, friend. No doubt the best life in the world, if only you are strong enough to lead it.
Yes, it is the life, the only life to live, responded the water rat dreamily, and without his usual wholehearted conviction.
I did not say exactly that, replied the stranger cautiously, but no doubt it is the best. I've tried it, I know, and because I've just tried it, 6 months of it, and know it's the best, here I am, footsore and hungry, tramping away from it, tramping southward, following the old call back to my old life, the life which is mine and which will not let me go.
Is this then yet another of them? Mused the rat. And where have you just come from? He asked. He hardly dared to ask where he was bound for. He seemed to know the answer only too well.
Nice little farm, replied the wayfarer briefly. Up along in that direction. He nodded northwards. Never mind about it. I had everything I could want, everything I had any right to expect in life, and more, and here I am. I'm glad to be here all the same, though, glad to be here. So many miles farther on the road, so many hours nearer to my heart's desire.
His shining eyes held fast to the horizon, and he seemed to be listening for some sound that was wanting from the inland acreage, vocal as it was with the cheerful music of pasturage and farmyard. You are not one of us, said the water rat, nor yet a farmer, nor even, I should judge, of this country.
Right, I am a seafaring rat, I am, and the port I originally hail from is Constantinople. Don't know where my accent suddenly come from then. And though I'm a sort of a foreigner there too, in a manner of speaking. You will have heard of Constantinople, friend? A fair city, and an ancient and glorious one, linked, as it were, with southern England. And you may have heard too of Sigurd, King of Norway. Please don't have a bit of Norwegian in you as well. And how he sailed thither with 60 ships, and how he and his men rode up through streets all canopied in their honour with purple and gold, and how the emperor and empress came down and banqueted with him on board his ship. When Sigurd returned home, many of his Northmen remained behind and entered the emperor's bodyguard, and my ancestor, a Norwegian born, stayed behind too with the ships that Sigurd gave the emperor. Seafarers we have been, and no wonder. As for me, the city of my birth is no more my home than any pleasant port between there and the London River. I know 'em all, and they all know me. Set me down on any of their quays or foreshores, and I'm home again.
I suppose you go on great voyages, said the water rat with growing interest. Months and months out of sight of land, and provisions running short, an allowance as to the water, and your mind communing with the mighty ocean, all that sort of thing.
Oh, by no means, said the sea rat frankly. Such a life as you describe would not suit me well at all. I'm in the coasting trade, and rarely out of sight of land. It's the jolly times on shore that appeal to me as much as any seafaring. Oh, those southern seaports, the smell of 'em, the riding lights at night, the glamour.
Well, perhaps you have chosen a better way, said the water rat, but rather doubtfully. Tell me something of your coasting, then, if you have a mind to, and what sort of harvest an animal of spirit might hope to bring home from it to warm his latter days with gallant memories by the fireside. For my life, I confess to you, feels to me today somewhat narrow and circumscribed.
My last voyage, began the sea rat, that landed me eventually in this country, bound with high hopes for my inland farm, will serve as a good example of any of them, and indeed as an epitome of my highly coloured life. Family troubles, as usual, began it. The domestic storm cone was hoisted, and I shipped myself on board a small trading vessel bound for Constantinople by classic seas whose every wave throbs with a deathless memory to the Grecian islands and the Levant. Those were golden days and balmy nights, in and out of harbour all the time, old friends everywhere, sleeping in some cool temple or ruined cistern during the heat of the day, feasting and song after sundown, under great stars set in a velvet sky. Thence we turned and coasted up the Adriatic, its shores swimming in an atmosphere of amber, rose, and aquamarine. We lay in a wide landlocked harbours. We roamed through ancient and noble cities until at last one morning, as the sun rose royally behind us, we rode into Venice down a path of gold. Oh, Venice is a fine city, wherein a rat can wander at his ease and take his pleasure. Or, when a weary of wandering can sit at the edge of the Grand Canal at night, feasting with his friends when the air is full of music and the sky full of stars, and the lights flash and shimmer on the polished steel prows of the swaying gondolas, packed so that you could walk across the canal on them from side to side. And then the food. Oh, do you like shellfish? Well, we won't linger over that now.
He was silent for a time, and the water rat, silent too and enthralled, floated on dream canals and heard a phantom song pealing high between vaporous grey wave-lapped walls.
Southwards we sailed again at last, continued the sea rat, coasting down the Italian shore till finally we made Palermo, and there I quitted for a long, happy spell on shore. I never stick too long at one ship. One gets narrow-minded and prejudiced. Besides, Sicily is one of my happy hunting grounds, and I know everybody there, and their ways just suit me. I spent many jolly weeks in the island, staying with friends up country. When I grew restless again, I took advantage of a ship that was trading to Sardinia and Corsica, and very glad I was to feel the fresh breeze and the sea spray in my face once more.
But isn't it very hot and stuffy down in the hold, I think you'd call it? Asked the water rat. The seafarer looked at him with the suspicion of a wink.
I'm an old hand. The captain's cabin is good enough for me.
It's a hard life, by all accounts, murmured the rat, sunk deep in thoughts.
For the crew it is, replied the seafarer gravely, again with the ghost of a wink. From Corsica, he went on, I made use of a ship that was taking wine to the mainland. We made a lassio in the evening, lay to, hauled up on our wine casks and hove 'em overboard, tied one to the other by a long line. Then the crew took to their boats and rowed shoreward, singing as they went, and drawing after them the long bobbing procession of casks, like a mile of porpoises. On the sands they had horses waiting, which dragged the casks up the steep street of the little town with a fine rush and clatter and scramble. When the last cask was in, we went and refreshed and rested and sat late into the night, drinking with our friends. Next morning I was off to the great olive woods for a spell and a rest. For now I'd done with islands for the time, and ports was shipping were plentiful. So I led a lazy life among the peasants, lying and watching 'em work, on stretched high on the hillside with the blue Mediterranean far below me, and so at length, by easy stages, and partly on foot, partly by sea, to Marseille at the meeting of old shipmates and the visiting of great ocean-bound vessels, and feasting once more. Talk of shellfish, why, sometimes I dream of the shellfish of Marseille, and I wake up crying.
That reminds me, said the polite water rat. You happened to mention you were hungry, and I ought to have spoken earlier. Of course you will stop and take your midday meal with me. My hole is close by. It is some time past noon, and you are very welcome to whatever there is.
Now I call that kind and brotherly of you, said the sea rat. I was indeed hungry when I sat down, and ever since I inadvertently happened to mention shellfish, my pangs have been extreme, but couldn't you fetch it along out here? I'm none too fond of going under hatches unless I'm obliged to, and then while we eat I could tell you more concerning my voyages and the pleasant life I lead. At least it's very pleasant to me, and by your attention I judge it commends itself to you, whereas if we go indoors, it is 100 to 1 that I shall presently fall asleep.
That is indeed an excellent suggestion, said the water rat, and he hurried off home. There he got out the luncheon basket and packed a simple meal, in which, remembering the stranger's origin and preferences, he took care to include a yard of long French bread, a sausage out of which the garlic sang, some cheese which lay down and cried, and a long-necked, straw-covered flask containing bottled sunshine shed and garnered on far southern slopes. Thus laden, he returned with all speed, and blushed for pleasure at the old seaman's commendations of his taste and judgment as together they unpacked the basket and lay out the contents on the grass by the roadside. The sea rat, as soon as his hunger was somewhat assuaged, continued the history of his latest voyage, conducting him, his simple hearer, from port to port of Spain, landing him at Lisbon, Oporto, and Bordeaux, introducing him to pleasant harbours of Cornwall and Devon, where he obviously picked up the accent, and so up the channel to that final quayside where, landing after winds long contrary, storm-driven and weather-beaten, he had caught the first magical hints and heraldings of another spring, and fired by these, had sped on a long tramp inland, hungry for the experiment of life on some quiet farmstead very far from the weary beating of any sea. Spellbound and quivering with excitement, the water rat followed the adventurer league by league over stormy bays, through crowded roadsteads, across harbour bays on a racing tide, up winding rivers that hid their busy little towns round a sudden turn, and left him with a regretful sigh planted at his dull inland farm, about which he desired to hear nothing. By this time their meal was over, and the seafarer, refreshed and strengthened, his voice more vibrant, his eye lit with a brightness that seemed caught from some faraway sea beacon, filled his glass with the red and glowing vintage of the south, and, leaning toward the river rat, compelled his gaze and held him body and soul while he talked. Those eyes were of the changing foam-streaked grey-green of leaping northern seas. In the glass shone a hot ruby that seemed the very heart of the south, beating for him who had courage to respond to his pulsation. The twin lights, the shifting grey and the steadfast red, mastered the water rat and held him bound, fascinated and powerless. The quiet world outside their rays receded far away and ceased to be. And the talk, the wonderful talk, it flowed on, or was it speech entirely, or did it pass at times into song, chanty of the sailors weighing the dripping anchor, sonorous hum of the shrouds in the tearing northeaster, ballad of the fisherman hauling his nets at sundown against an apricot sky, chords of guitar and mandolin from gondola? Did it change into the cry of the wind? Plaintive at first, angrily shrill as the freshened, rising into a tearing whistle, sinking to a musical trickle of air from the leach of the bellying sail. All these sounds the spellbound listener seemed to hear, and with them the hungry complaint of the gulls and the seamews, the soft thunder of the breaking wave, the cry of the protesting shingle. Back into speech again it passed, and with beating heart he was following the adventures of a dozen seaports, the fights, the escapes, the rallies, the comradeships, the gallant undertakings, or he searched islands for treasure, fished in still lagoons and dozed day long on warm white sand. Of deep-sea fishings he heard tell, and mighty silver gatherings of the mile-long net, of sudden perils, noise of breakers on a moonless night, or the tall bows of the great liner taking shape overhead through the fog, of the merry homecoming. The headland rounded, the harbour lights opening out, the groups seemed dimly in the quay, the cheery hail, the splash of the hawser, the trudge of the steep little street toward the comforting glow of red curtained windows. Lastly, in his waking dream, it seemed to him that the adventurer had risen to his feet, but was still speaking, still holding him fast with his sea-grey eyes. "And now," he was softly saying, "I take to the road again, holding on southwestwards for many a long and dusty day, till at last I reach the little grey sea town I know so well, that clings along one steep side of the harbour. There, through deep doorways, you look down flights of stone steps, overhung by great pink tufts of valerian and ending in a patch of sparkling blue water. The little boats that lie tethered to the rings and stanchions of the old seawall are gaily painted as those I clambered in and out of in my own childhood. The salmon leap on the flood tide, schools of mackerel flash and play past quaysides and foreshores, and by the windows the great vessels glide night and day up to their moorings aforth to the open sea. There, sooner or later, the ships of all seafaring nations arrive, and there, at its destined hour, the ship of my choice will let go its anchor, and I shall take my time. I shall tarry and bide till at last the right one lies waiting for me, warped out in midstream, loaded low, her bowsprit pointing down harbour. I shall slip on board, or by boat or along a hawser, and then one morning I shall wake to the song and tramp of the sailors, the clink of the capstan and the rattle of the anchor chain coming merrily in. We shall break out the jib and the foresail, the white houses on the harbour side will glide slowly past us as the steers gathers steering away, and the voyage will have begun. And she forges toward the headland. She will clothe herself in canvas, and then once outside, the sounding slap of great green seas as she heels to the wind pointing south. And you will come too, young brother, for the days pass and never return, and the south still waits for you. Take the adventure, heed the call, now ere the irrevocable moment passes. 'Tis but a banging of the door behind you, a blithesome step forward, and they are out of the old life and into the new. Then some day long hence, jog home here if you will, when the cup has been drained and the play has been played, and sit down by your quiet river with a store of goodly memories for company. You can easily overtake me on the road, for you're young and I am aging, and go softly. I will linger and look back, and at last I will see you surely coming, eager and light-hearted, with all the south in your face. The voice died away and ceased as an insect's tiny trumpet dwindled swiftly into silence, and the water rat, paralysed and staring, saw at last but a distant speck on the white surface of the road. Mechanically he rose and proceeded to repack the luncheon basket carefully and without haste. Mechanically he returned home, gathered together a few small necessaries and special treasures he was fond of, and put them in a satchel, acting with slow deliberation, moving about the room like a sleepwalker, listening ever with parted lips. He swung the satchel over his shoulder, carefully selected a stout stick for its wayfaring, and with no haste, but with no hesitation at all, he stepped across the threshold just as the mole appeared at the door. Where are you off to, Ratty?" asked the mole in great surprise, gasping him by the arm. "Going south with the rest of 'em," murmured the rat in a dreamy monotone, never looking at him. "Seawards first, then on shipboard, and then to the shores that are calling me." He pressed resolutely forward, still without haste, but with dogged fixity on purpose. But the mole, now thoroughly alarmed, placed himself in front of him, and looking into his eyes saw that they were glazed and set and turned a streaked and shifting grey. Not his friend's eyes, but the eyes of some other animal. Grappling with him strongly, he dragged him inside, threw him down, and held on to him. The rat struggled desperately for a few moments, and then his strength seemed suddenly to leave him, and he lay still and exhausted, with closed eyes, trembling. Presently the mole assisted him to rise and placed him in a chair, where he sat collapsed and shrunken into himself, his body shaken by a violent shivering, passing in time into a hysterical fit of dry sobbing. Mole made the door fast, threw the satchel into a drawer and locked it, and sat down quietly at the table by his friend, waiting for the strange seizure to pass. Gradually the rat sank into a troubled doze, broken by starts and confused murmurings of things strange and wild and foreign to the unenlightened mole, and from that he passed into a deep slumber. Very anxious in mind, the mole left him for a time and busied himself with household matters, and it was getting dark when he returned to the parlour and found the rat where he'd left him, wide awake indeed, but listless, silent, and dejected. He took one hasty glance at his eyes, found them, to his great gratification, clear and dark and brown again as before, and then sat down and tried to cheer him up and help him to relate what had just happened to him. Poor Ratty did his best by degrees to explain things, but how could he put into cold words what had mostly been suggestion? How recall for another's benefit the haunting sea voices that had sung to him? How reproduce at second hand the magic of the seafarer's 100 reminiscences? Even to himself, now the spell was broken and the glamour gone, he found it difficult to account for what he had seemed, some hours ago, the inevitable and only thing. It was not surprising, then, that he failed to convey to the mole any clear idea of what he had been through that day. To the mole this much was plain. The fit or attack had passed away and had left him sane again, though shaken and cast down by the reaction. But he seemed to have lost all interest for the time in the things that went to make up his daily life, as well as in all pleasant forecastings of the altered days and doings that the changing season was surely bringing. Casually then, and with seeming indifference, the mole turned his talk to the harvest that was being gathered in, the towering wagons and their straining teams, the growing ricks and the large moon rising over bare acres dotted with sheaves. He talked of the reddening apples, of the browning nuts, of jams and preserves and the distilling of cordials, till by easy stages such as these he reached midwinter, its hearty joys and its snug home life, and then he became simply lyrical. By degrees the rat began to sit up and join in. His dull eyes brightened, and he lost some of his listless air. Presently and tactful, Mole slipped away and returned with a pencil and a few sheets of paper, which he placed on a table at his friend's elbow. "It's quite a long time since you did any poetry," he remarked. "You might have a try at it this evening instead of, well, brooding over things so much. I've an idea that you'll feel a lot better when you've got something jotted down, if it's only just the rhyming parts." The rat pushed the paper away from him wearily, but the discreet Mole took occasion to leave the room, and when he peeped in again some time later, the rat was absorbed and deaf to the world, alternately scribbling and sucking the top of his pencil. It is true that he sucked a good deal more than he scribbled, but it was a joy to the Mole to know that the cure had at last begun. Longest segment ever. I did that all in one go as well. I didn't go for tea time halfway through tonight. I just sat here the whole time. Next chapter, chapter 10, The Further Adventures of Toad. Kenneth, come in. Would like you to write a chapter about... will it be about Mole? No. A chapter about... Will it be about Badger? Because we haven't heard from him in a while. No. Kenneth, we'd like you to make this extra chapter that we've asked you about. We'd like you to write it about a ghost rat from the sea who's actually from Constantinople but with Norwegian heritage. Could you do that for us? Maybe you could write him with a southern accent. Blimey. I thought it was filler. What do you think? Did you think that chapter was worthwhile? Nah, mate. I did read earlier on, Dragonfly said this interesting comment. Let me just find it. Here we are. I felt that the chapter with the baby otter and the god Pan to be kind of a filler chapter. More than that, I kind of felt like it just came out of left field and didn't really sync up with other chapters. That was another weird chapter, wasn't it? Like, what? I want to insert there. I can't, but I want to insert there. You know, there's that meme with John Travolta in Pulp Fiction where he's Vincent Vega, where he's going like that. You know the bit? That's what I want to insert there after both of those chapters. It's like, huh? Anyway, here's Melanie. I just did this bit for you, Melanie, because she says your dialogue and inflection in the imaginary meeting of Graham and his editors was just perfect. Thanks. And I'll tell you what, here's our mate Gorilla. He has just been sat on the front porch to watch cops. Not the cops. Ooh, let's sit on the porch to watch them go past, but cops, as in turn 32, I got him at gunpoint. That one, you know. Good program choice there, Gorilla. All right, okay, I'm not going to talk much tonight because I can't wait to see how much this tots up to. I bet it's going to be about 30 minutes. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.